Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here with my spoiler-free review for The Radio Hour by Victoria Purman. I did receive this ARC in exchange for an honest review, and I will put content warnings in the description box as always, and this book has actually already released at the time that I'm posting this. So let's just get into the review. So this is set in 1956, I think is the year, in Sydney, Australia. And our main character is Miss Martha Berry. As the back of the book describes her, she is on the brink of 50 years old, unmarried, and one of an army of polite, invisible women who go to work each day at the country's national broadcaster and get things done without fuss, fanfare, or reward. And I think that is a really excellent way to set up her character. She is very much this, like, very polite, like she was raised to be, you know, very polite, like that girls and women are always supposed to be like respectful and demure and like all of this. If they are working, that extends to the workplace. And so Martha is a secretary, and she has been working at the Australian Broadcasting Company for like 24 years or something like that. So she has a huge amount of knowledge and experience. She's extremely good at her job. But of course, none of the men at the broadcaster respect or appreciate or understand the enormous amount of work that goes into being a secretary or any kind of assistant like that. And honestly, even in modern day, I think that is not always as respected a profession as it should be. But she's like really, really wonderful at her job. And she doesn't get any appreciation for it. Like really none of the like secretary girls or script girls do, but she's like reasonably content. She tells herself like, this is just how things are. And you know, that's all. But something happens when her newest boss, because she gets moved around a lot between different departments whenever anybody needs a secretary. Her newest boss is Quentin Quinn, who is very young and inexperienced and also has like absolutely no knowledge or respect or interest basically in anything that they do at the radio broadcaster, aside from like making a name for himself. And he has been given this incredible opportunity to basically try and duplicate the success of their most popular radio show. They're going to have the time slot right after it, and they're like hoping to like continue to draw in new listeners, especially with the advent of television and you know how that's going to affect everything. The problem, of course, is that Quentin Quinn doesn't know what he's doing, will not admit that he doesn't know what he's doing, will not accept any kind of help or information that Martha can give him, and he also has a drinking problem. And so all of this combined puts Martha in a position of realizing that if she tries to let Quentin Quinn do the job he's supposed to do, they are not going to have a show, and it's going to be a disaster, and it's going to reflect badly on the entire network and also on Martha personally, and that understandably really upsets her. She also needs the money because she takes care of her and her mother, because her mother has like very severe arthritis and she can't work anymore, and so Martha works to support both of them. So all of this means that Martha's pretty desperate, and she's like, well, I know and love radio shows. Like, I listen to them. I have worked in this industry for a couple decades now. I'm just going to have to write the scripts myself. And she does, and they're brilliant. She writes with this warmth and authenticity, especially for the women characters. Like, this new show is groundbreaking in the way that it includes women's concerns, and the way that it really writes these fully developed characters who are also women and all of these different things. And this show ends up being a massive hit and also just being a really important, again, kind of groundbreaking show. And Martha knew from the beginning that, of course, like Quinn is going to get all of the credit for this, and for a while she's kind of okay with that. Like, she knew that at least, that it was going to happen. But then, of course, some conflict comes up where her secret might get out, and she has to decide what to do about that. And meanwhile, she has been finding this incredible fulfillment in writing this show and doing this work and seeing how it touches people, like touches listeners, and especially women who are not used to seeing themselves in stories. Yeah, and of course, along the way, she has some unexpected allies. She has some friends who she really relies on, and I loved this so much. I tend to like sort of go by sections in my reviews, but you'll see that this is one of those books, like a lot of books actually, where they kind of like bleed into each other a lot, and I think that cohesiveness is one of the strengths of the book. So like the writing I really enjoyed. I think it's very like warm and human, and I think that works perfectly for the story and also for the like sort of story within a story that we get, because we do get segments of the radio show that Martha writes and is you know, secretly producing, basically. So I thought the writing was really excellent, and I also really loved those radio sections. I think when you have a story where there is some kind of like writing or narrative or any kind of like story that is included, like you actually read parts of it, and that it is a plot point that this is like really, really good, I think obviously the author has to be, you know, really sure to make that writing really, really good, or it's distracting, you know, like at least for me. I find it very distracting if I'm reading a story that is all about how good something is, and I'm like, I don't think it's very good. So thankfully that was not the problem here. I really loved the bits of the radio show that we got. I think the writing in those sections was just as good. I also thought that the sort of plot and overall story just was really, really well balanced. Like, we have the plot of the radio show, of course, and we have Martha and sort of her story, her like character journey. We have like her friends and her mother, and we also have, which I'll get into in the themes part, but we also deal a lot with sort of these bigger issues, but on these very small stages of people's lives, and I loved that combination. I think that one of the things this book really highlights, and that I loved about it so much, is that like having a quote unquote like small life, in the sense that you're an ordinary person, and, you know, you have like your family and your friends, and you like go to your job, and there are like, you know, these moments that are really joyful and beautiful, and then there are some times that are just not that great, like just the ordinary business of living. That all of that doesn't mean that your life is less important or less beautiful or can be less fulfilling. I hope that made sense, but like, I just really love the respect, the respect and appreciation and love for like, especially women who are in that position. Like, I just think the personal plot and how that connected to this bigger story and this bigger commentary on like what women were dealing with at the time and still deal with in terms of like workplace harassment and like women's issues being considered like taboo, but also like things that only women would care about, rather than like, you know, people who care about women in their lives as well. There's just a lot that it does so well, and it didn't ever feel like it was doing too much. It's funny because there was a little bit at the beginning where I thought it was maybe being a little too, I don't know, almost a little heavy-handed with some of like the messaging of the book, but as the story went on, I actually feel like it was very subtle and really well done, because it was mirrored in the radio show. Like, we have Martha, who is like slipping in these like little bits that shouldn't be that subversive, but they are. And because of that, we have this novel that is really about the smaller ways that women can be and are subversive. And I just think that was very cool. And I also loved this cast of characters. I loved Martha and felt for her so much. And this is very like, as I'm talking about this, I'm like, I think one of the reasons I loved this is that it is very much in the like Anne Elliot from Persuasion category of like just a genuinely good, practical, you know, polite, reserved person who is like finally being appreciated the way they always should have been, and that is so satisfying. I also adored her friends. Like, the female friendship in here is top tier. Like, there are three younger women especially who Martha is sort of like semi-friends or acquaintances with at the beginning of the book, but as that goes on, we really see this friendship deepen and turn into a kind of mentorship in some ways, and so that is really beautiful. I really loved the connections that she forms with some of her colleagues, like some of the actors and other people who work on this show. I also think it's really cool that this book does not have a love story. Like, of course, Martha's journey and like the feminism of this book would still be equally valid if it did, but I do think it's really important to have some stories like this that don't involve romantic like fulfillment as part of the fulfillment of the story. And then finally, like, the themes and messages of this book were spot on. I have kind of been talking about them throughout the review, but like, I think the way that the feminism is like used and discussed in this book is excellent. Like, it obviously wouldn't have been called feminism at the time that this book is set. That wouldn't have been considered an appropriate thing. But seeing Martha realize through this like piling up of experiences and hearing what is happening to other women and like all of these things coming together, and she kind of snaps in like the best way, and it is so satisfying to see that and to see her start to do something about it, which she also was able to do because of the friends and allies and like resources that they have. This book really shows the importance of allyship, and also of when you are given an opportunity, when you are given like a certain privilege or like a chance to do something, like the importance of pulling others up with you. I love that that is such a prominent aspect of this book. Like, we continually see other women doing this for Martha turning around and doing it for younger women under her, and like, it's just, it is so cool and it is so moving. And I loved also that even though of course we are focusing on this main group of characters and specifically of women, I love that the little mentions that we get of other sort of background female characters, it still gives you the feeling that like the story views them as equally important. And just because they are not like center stage in this narrative, it doesn't mean that they are like the other girls that are, you know, not as cool or not as feminist as our main cast. Like, basically, this book does not put down other women in its quest to highlight the struggles that women faced in this environment. And I think that is so important, and sadly still more rare than it should be. The point of the book is not that women deserve to be more than secretaries. The point is that secretaries and everybody, like all work, should be appreciated, and that work traditionally done by women is generally very underappreciated. And also that Martha gets this opportunity that makes her realize that in addition to all this like organizational assistant type stuff that she has been doing that she's really good at, she is also really good at something else. And I think that is so cool. And again, I feel like I keep saying the word important, but I just think that's really important that we have stories that when they are dealing with it, like women's issues and like feminism and anything connected to that, that we really remind ourselves that the problem is not that like being a secretary is like shameful or unimportant. The point is that that is hard work and it deserves respect, and other positions also deserve respect, and women, along with everybody else, should have the opportunity to decide what work they want to do or what kind of role they want to have. And then finally, the last thing I'll say about the themes, which I sort of touched on as well, is that I really loved how the plot of the radio show and then the plot of the overall book itself, they both really highlight how necessary and powerful seemingly small acts are. Like, you know, Martha will slip in a few lines of dialogue and she won't make an entire episode about like this issue or something, but having it show up in stories, having it treated the way that Martha does, you know, with care and with compassion and nuance, like that is also really important and really necessary for change and for activism. And I think that on a meta level, the book itself reflects that as well, because Martha's story and like all of the plot threads of this book are also handled that way. It really shows that change doesn't have to be huge and dramatic, or that activism doesn't have to be huge or dramatic. And of course, in this case, it does end up being, like, the radio show does end up being a, you know, huge countrywide hit. And so it does end up becoming much more, I guess, like dramatic or widespread. But I think very crucially, the book also shows through these characters and through these stories that the more individual things that Martha is doing and that these other characters are doing, the way that they are looking out for each other, the way that they are like using any power that they might have to like protect others, like all of that is also so deeply important and necessary on a personal level as well. I feel like that last thread got away from me just a bit, but I obviously loved this. I gave the Radio Hour 5 stars, would definitely highly recommend it. Yeah, let me know if you've picked this up or if you're interested in it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!